Finance Chick, where I help the overthinking, procrastinating, perfectionist women create wealth building systems so they can live a life that they love. In this episode, we are going to be talking to a special guest because it is Mental Health Monday, and we definitely have to talk about how mental health affects your finances and how your finances affect your mental health at the same time. So, before we hop into to today's episode, let's go ahead and roll the intro, and we'll go ahead and get started. You just have to build wealth where you are. All right. So, like I said, we're going to have a nice conversation about mental health and money. And I'm going to bring in my special guest, Dr. Kia. Hey, Kia,
Hey,
how are you?
I'm doing awesome.
Awesome. So, I did go ahead and just give a preface that we are going to be talking about mental health and money today. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Dr. Kia. I'm a licensed therapist located in Laurel, Maryland. I do lots with relationships and lots with mental health. Um, so those are my two focuses and passions.
Awesome. Okay, so I know with you being in this profession for quite some time, you have seen your fair share of how mental health affects, relationships and money together. What has been like a common thing that you've seen the most?
Well, as far as when I think about money and mental health, the thing that comes up more frequently is anxiety and depression, I would say. So those two things go hand in hand, especially if someone has concerns about finances and how it's going to impact their life, currently and how it's going to impact their future. So sometimes like thinking about it and going over it can cause one of those two responses.
Okay. Do you see that there is a different response between men and women in a way?
Interestingly enough, the response is still the same, but sometimes on the outside it looks different.
Mm,
So we think about like men and women being different, but many times on the inside they're going through the same types of things. Um, like where a woman might get anxious about something and trying to convince them, like if let's say you're in a relationship, you're trying to convince your partner of like what needs to happen, and so the anxiety is coming out of like over communicating or like being very like forward, whereas sometimes with men, it may be that they internalize it. They don't really say anything. They kind of shut down and they're doing what they need to do. Um, but it's the anxiety causing them to shut down and seem like they're not available, and all of that kind of stuff. So it may just show up differently sometimes, but it's really the same thing.
okay. I like that perspective because I know sometimes we hear that men and women process things differently. And because I know on one end, it's like I guess, the hierarchy of needs, I guess, they're the same, but are shown different, like you said. But in more terms of, you'll hear women talk about, especially in relationships, craving the stability and the structure of finance because it provides security. And men often have the same needs, but it's communicated differently. So, how would you say that um, people should go about communicating those needs and talking about those things a lot more?
Well, I would say two things. Like first is like what are you doing to deal with the whatever is causing the stress? So like is it like a budgeting issue does that need to take place so that it can help you to feel less stress? Or is it looking at um like what your output is, like whatever you're doing in that moment, is it what actually can help you with the issue? And then as far as like communicating it to your significant other, being open and transparent with what's actually happening with you, like what are you concerned about, what are you feeling in the moment. I would say being transparent is the easiest way to communicate,
It's
letting people
funny.
know what's really going on.
It's funny how you say transparency is the easiest way because being transparent isn't easy at all.
You know what? So you're right. Let me say something about that. The transparency usually gets people the results that they're looking for, but the other stuff, because we've been so used to responding in a specific way, whether that is shutting down or not sharing, not being open, like that feels like, okay, I'm going to deal with it or whatever on my own. Um, that feels better because we are not necessarily, we're doing what we're used to doing and we're doing what we've seen other people do, but it doesn't usually get the results that you want. Because if you want your partner to buy in with what you're doing or thinking about doing, or you want them to understand where you're coming from, then transparency is actually what gets that result, not withholding information or pretending like everything is good. Because then they're like, why are you just being nasty? Like, why are you so edgy? Like, that's what they're going to see. Because many times, like, we have primary and secondary emotions. So a primary emotion is like the true emotion of what, like, at the root of what's going on. But the secondary emotion could be like, we learned to show anger or frustration in these situations. So the anger and frustration is coming forward where that might bump heads. But if you actually show that, no, actually I'm anxious and I'm uncomfortable with X, Y, and Z, people can respond to that much easier.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot more sense. 'Cause I'm telling you right now, being transparent is not fun or easy.
Yeah, that's real.
So, because one thing that I've noticed, especially since I work with mostly women, is they have a hard time, and I'll lump myself into that category too, having a hard time with communicating needs and fears around money, because money is such a touchy topic at times. Not at times, but a lot of times. And it's like what I've noticed is either the women who come into the membership or the one-on-ones, they'll say, I want to accomplish X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, okay, have you spoke to your partner about it? Well, I don't know how to speak to them about it because sometimes it doesn't feel like they're listening, or I don't think that they're going to hear me, or I don't think they're going to respond the way I want them to respond. So I am stuck in this one section because I don't want to communicate with my partner.
Yeah.
So it seems like there's a lot of projection when they come in. Like, okay, I know I've got this down packed on my end, but now I have to connect the dots for my partner, and I'm scared to do it. So we end up stuck for a while until they finally have that conversation.
Mm-hmm. No, I
So
think it goes like you said. I like the word you use, connect the dots, because when you're thinking about it, what did it take you to be able to get to the place of being able to, all right, let me get help and assistance with this because this is what I need. How can I help? Like, if they're with you, right? How can Atikwa help me to connect these dots so that I can be successful and I can fully understand like what I need to do next? So it's like you're at stage 10 or 5 or whatever, and he's at stage 0. So then you need to actually backtrack and rewind and think about like, all right, what were all my concerns walking into it, and how can I help him move past that a little bit faster, with being forward with information that might be able to help him to see my perspective or where I'm coming from.
that makes sense because it seems as though since I will say the statistic that I think it was 90% or 97%, one of those of women are the main ones who handle the finances in the home. And a lot of times the partners are hands off until they absolutely need to be hands on. But it's like if you're learning a new skill or you're talking about now investing money into a market that kind of looks crazy and they see that the market looks crazy, now you're going to have to explain, okay, this is what I learned. This is why a bad market isn't bad to invest in right now. And you're like literally having to walk them through with baby steps. Okay, this is how I learned this. This is how I know that we're going to be good in the future. Here are the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Let me give you the information as much as possible. But I think sometimes it feels like there's a level of frustration because they've already done all the work. And then now there's like some backtracking that they're going to have to do to get on the same page.
Right. And it really is about recognizing that that's going to have to happen, and then remembering that if he came to you with some random, because it's going to feel like you coming to me with some random investment, like what is that? Like if he comes to you with something that you feel is random, the backstory or helping you catch up is going to be is going to be what you want him to do. So I get it. Like I get and understand why it's like, oh no, like that's annoying. You should already have this information, or I shouldn't have to backtrack so far. But the reality is, we do have to backtrack so far so that we can get them to understand where our thoughts are coming from, and that it's not super random, right? Because
Yeah.
especially when you think about money, like people don't want to waste their money, and then they've seen probably all these stories about how people put their money and stuff, and they lose their money, and it's like, okay, that's not what I know you don't know nothing about investment, so how I'm why am I supposed to trust that that's what you're gonna do? So you're
Right.
helping put their mind at ease, which kind of goes back into like some level of anxiety, right? um, you're helping put their mind at ease with letting them know that this is more concrete than you might assume.
Yes. And I think one of the things that I also see too, like when you're talking about how that partner may have seen how a lot of people put money in X, Y, and Z and they lost this money and whatever, especially if you talk about like cryptocurrency or the meme investments or whatever. And it's like there's a level of anxiety because one, people are comparing themselves and their process to everybody else's. And when you don't even
Mhm.
know what they've got going on, yeah, you might have heard, somebody had lost $50,000 in an investment, but what was that investment? Was it a foundational investment, or was it something that they just found on social media? So I know there's a lot of comparison that is feeding into people's anxiety and depression around
Mhm.
money and just around life in general.
Mhm. Yeah.
For those people, like we've heard the saying that thief is a comparison. I mean, what? Comparison is a thief of joy. Um, in that sense, what tip would you give someone or give people who's struggling with anxiety and depression because they're comparing their journey to somebody else's?
I would say remember context matters, and many times you don't have the full story because people aren't sharing their whole life with you. They're sharing snapshots, and it's
Hmm.
really hard to compare like your whole life, like the ups and the downs, to somebody's ups. Like it's not even fair. So
Hmm.
remembering that, people show you what they want you to see, or they only allow you to have access to the part sometimes that they're most comfortable with, and so you're
Hmm.
not comparing yourself to a real person. And the other thing is give yourself grace, because especially you're doing something new, something different, you're trying to make a change in your life. Like change is not easy. Change is like one of the most difficult things that people can go through. So allow yourself to have the grace to be able to make the changes, and give yourself room for error, for even like mistakes along the way. So like give yourself the real opportunity to learn.
Yeah. I like that. Because I think in a world of social media where everybody is showing their highlight reels, that you automatically assume that you're behind the curve when you don't really know what's happening. So you're automatically saying, okay, I have to do what they're doing so I can be successful. But you're doing all of these things and it's putting you into a downward spiral, because you're still trying to catch up when you don't even know where their race started or if it even started to begin with.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Yeah, people don't give you the whole journey.
no, not at all. And I know I've learned that lesson the hard way, especially we've had conversations about how I feel about social media and stuff like that. And even the pivot that I made, and I've caught myself in that trap because I'm like, dang, I've been doing this for a while, or I feel like I should be here because that person is there. And it's like, but I don't know what they've got. I don't know what they've done to get to this point.
Hmm.
I'm over here comparing, maybe my chapter 4 to somebody's chapter 44, and it
Hmm.
just doesn't make sense to do it that way. And I think if we all understand that we need to take a step back and breathe and look at the context, and a lot of
Hmm.
times we're missing a lot of things, then maybe we should just focus on our own lane.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I think that that's so. When you were talking about that, it made me think about like the Facebook creator Mark Zuckerberg, and how
Mhm.
he talks about like he failed about 10 times. Y'all didn't see none of the failures, so you show up and you're looking at his like 15th business, like he's on year 10. You're really, but it looks like he's on year one, right? Because it's like, oh, this is a new business. It just started and it's thriving, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, nah, that's not year one. It just appears like it's year one. So I think that that's really something to think about. I think that that was a good point.
Yeah. Like I know that for a while there were a couple of people that I've seen that'll say, it took me 12 years to be an overnight success or something like
Mhm.
that.
Yes.
And that puts things into perspective. And it was a very helpful perspective because you don't know how long it took people to get to this journey. You don't know the ups and downs. So comparison is really a waste of time and energy.
It really is. And even think about my story. So I have a therapy practice, a private practice. Initially, I worked in my last job, I should say, I worked in the hospital and I was a
Mhm.
supervisor. And I was like, yeah, I can't leave this job because I need the money or income for this place. So my anxiety
Yes.
kept me stuck in that place. And then you see other people like, oh, looks like they just got up and made their business and they're all successful. Like they have employees and everything. Like,
Yeah.
I'm comparing myself to these situations and then also being anxious, which is keeping me stuck and so many things going on. But knowing what I know now, it's like, okay, they probably been working at this for a minute. Just like when I went out to private practice, people might have thought like, oh, she just went out there and did it.
Yeah.
No, I actually had both jobs for probably 3 years. And then the thing that made me leave is because I was like, these people are crazy and they're about to drive me insane. And so that is what caused me to jump. That it wasn't like, oh yeah, it was overnight. That's a joke. So I think that that's really something to keep in consideration, like the whole picture.
Yes. Now, okay, I want to take the conversation to, I guess, the other end of the spectrum because we all know we see the rising cost of things. Inflation is getting in the way. It's putting people in a financial bind, and what first things first, you can't budget yourself to wealth. You can budget yourself to stability in a way, but if the income isn't there and you're working on that, what can you say to people who are doing the best they can to control what they can while navigating this space?
So one thing I would say is tap into community of people who are also in a place of building and recognizing that maybe they're not where they want to be, or maybe things are kind of, rocky and y'all can support each other. The other thing I would say is, you know, being okay with where you're at, but also remembering that you're going someplace. So this is not your final stop. Like this is a stop along the way. It may be a little bit more stressful because of maybe whatever's going on with your finances in this moment doesn't leave you with the flexibility necessary to do maybe even some of the basic things that you want to do. But it's really about accepting things for where they are, seeing
Mhm.
and being open to where you can, make headway and change. Because the other reality is, by being really like spiraling into like a true depression or true anxiety, kind of keeps us stuck, and it doesn't give our mind the ability to use all of its functions to be able to be creative and find ways to get out of the situation. So the more we can manage, manage that and also be in reality with what's truly happening and recognize that this is just a stop along the way, those things can help to bridge the gap so you can continue to move forward.
I like that. Um, so I know we've heard time and time again that no man is an island or no woman is meant to be an island or by themselves. And I think with the anxiety and depression around finances, especially during a time where there's financial uncertainty due to inflation and everything else going on, um, it it's easy to put yourself it's easy to isolate yourself, and it's easy
Mhm.
to, focus on what you don't have and where you aren't, when you're trying to get to a place. But what happens if they are isolating themselves or they don't have people in their immediate circle that they can find to, help bring them out of that depression or, just out of that cycle while they're trying to build and maintain at the same time?
So I would say a therapist would be good, to help with balance. So reach out and connect with a therapist that can be supportive and help you through that time. And then I would also say that there are manufactured communities of people who are doing the same thing as well. So it might not be something that you have immediate access to, like in your neighborhood, in that way, but there are definitely people online, and even in could be like a meetup group of people who are in a similar space. Like, because right now, like, everybody is seeing the impact of inflation. Like, nobody nobody's really immune to that right now. I
Right.
mean, I look at the gas prices are absolutely ridiculous. So that's money that people would have been doing other things with. And you think about like the grocery store, somebody told me that and this was yesterday when I was meeting with a client, they were like, I went to the grocery store, I got half of the items and it cost the same amount
Wow.
that I would have paid before. Like, and I didn't even, basically half of what I would have been able to get. So I'm trying to figure out, like, what am I about to cut out? Like, I'm cutting out my coffee, I'm cutting out this, I'm cutting out that. So that's like real life. So you're
Yeah.
not alone in that. So know that there is a community of people who are going through a similar thing, and if you do find a community on like Facebook or anywhere that might even be a free resource where people are talking about it and supporting each other around it. It's
Yeah.
a beautiful school though.
And I'm sure that there are a lot of places, like those communities where people are also sharing tips of how they're cutting costs too, because I love being able to say that, just because you're trying to get to the next level doesn't mean you have to overly sacrifice everything. But in a world where everywhere everyone is feeling the pinch, because heck, I live in Central Texas. Never in my life would I have imagined seeing gas at 4 something down here. Like just 2 years ago, we were sitting at 198 a gallon. And
Ooh.
now we're sitting at 415 or something. So I'm seeing that, but I also realized too that, okay, what is it that I can do to control, this situation? What can we do to cut down on costs as much as possible? So over the pandemic, I became a crazy plant lady. But now that's spilling over to me actually wanting to do like a fruit and vegetable garden, an
Mhm.
herb garden, things like that. Cause I know eventually it'll help cut down on costs too, but it helps
Mhm.
that it's also like a peaceful hobby of mine at the same time.
Mhm.
So it's like now we can acknowledge that there's a problem. We can acknowledge that inflation is an issue and that your income may be taking a hit. But what can you do to help minimize it? Now we have to go in a problem solving mode. Um, is there
Mhm.
like a little side hustle that you can pick up on? Is there, you know, can you cut down on getting, I don't know, your nails done twice a week? I mean, twice a month instead of 3 times a month. Like just things like that. I'm not saying overly sacrifice at all. But what is it that we can do in the moment to try to control things as much as possible without feeling like we can't do anything?
Yeah. And I love the plant idea. Because that's a peaceful hobby that can help you to relax, and it also can help you to have food.
Yeah.
So it's cutting down on some costs that way as well. So that's awesome.
Yes. And I think I know for me, it's no secret that I've been in therapy for a while. So just talking to my therapist about, having hobbies to provide peace and to give me a healthy escape when, there is stress, and just other people when they're stressed. You got to find some sort of a healthy escape, so you can free your mind a little bit, give you some wiggle room in your thoughts. And then so while you are doing that peaceful activity or whatever it is that you're doing, your brain can naturally come up with some problem solving
Mhm.
solutions for you, instead of just, okay, I have to be at the drawing board. I need to figure out now what I can do now, because that's not how things work.
Right. And being in that peaceful space can give you the ability to go to the creative space in your mind, which allows you to have access to more problem solving tools. which, I'm glad that you brought that up. That's such an important component. Like, if you think about, all right, I need to sit down and I need to stress about it, but that actually is counterproductive because now you're super stressed and you cut off parts of your brain
Yes.
because of the stress. You got cortisol running through your system, like all of that. Versus, let me just go and kind of like take a break and garden and do some things like that, and see what comes to my mind as far as like brainstorming and that sort of thing. Um,
Yeah. That's one thing I'll say about this pandemic, that it's allowed me to lock parts of my brain that have been otherwise locked by stress and anxiety.
mhm,
Because it's like you realize that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, and being stressed out and hammering at the details over and over. It causes you stress. It puts you in a state of anxiety, and ultimately leads to depression because you're not able to figure out your solution as fast as you want to. And sometimes it's just best to take a step back, put the phone down, put the laptop down, and just breathe
mhm.
for a minute.
Absolutely.
Whew. All right. So we're coming up on about almost 30 minutes. Are there any additional tips that you can give for people who are maybe struggling with anxiety, depression around money right now?
Um, well, I would also say, I guess it depends on where you're at with the anxiety and depression. Like I said, a therapist is a good way to go. Being able to find a way to de-stress.
Mhm.
Some of the things that some of the people that worked with have used are like yoga has been helpful. Some of the breathing techniques and breathing activities.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Calm app. That's the easy way.
Yes.
Yes, the Calm app is a friend because it has all these sort of like different breathing activities. And since, for some people who need it more of like a guided type of breathing, guided type of meditation, which comes with like imagery and things like that, it can
Mhm.
help you to kind of fully get out of your world and be able to help to regulate your body, which is really good. It's I would say it's an awesome tool and it works for many people. The
Yes.
other things, as a therapist, we use different tools. So like there's talk therapy, there's brain spotting, which kind of helps you to engages your brain in a different way, and
Mhm.
EMDR, just different types of modalities that can be beneficial. But ultimately, in finding an outlet, I think is going to be like one of the I would say outlet and community are like the two biggest things that I advocate for people to be able to get out of that space of anxiety and depression, because depression will have you isolated. Of course, on the severe end of depression, we're talking about people who might experience suicidal thoughts. They may
Mm.
experience like low energy, lack of ability to they, like you don't even have interest in doing things that you like all of those things can happen when you get into a true depressed state. So pushing yourself to continue to engage and continue to do things, even if you don't want to, because we find that sometimes people don't want to do things and they do them. They're like, oh, like this is actually better than I thought. It's like, yes, we're gonna have to like manufacture motivation right now. Because a lack of motivation, right, doesn't is not helpful,
Yep.
and it won't it will impact your ability to budget, right, impact your ability to really like even manage your finances in a way that's best for you, or even want to look at what the finances are, right, like anxiety to call you be like, oh, I'm not even gonna answer the phone, I'm not even gonna look at that, like anxiety can put you in that space. But some of the outlets like the exercise, walking, breathing activities, those kind of things can be really helpful, and being able to just help to regulate you to get back to the place of like, all right, let me refocus. Um, yeah. And of course, talking to somebody who can help you, like, because they can give you more of a blueprint. You'd be like, okay, I see it. I'm not there yet, but at least there's a
Yes.
path. Like that whole thing right there can be worth. It speaks volumes.
Yes, I would definitely agree. And I love the Calm app. I was using that for sleep for the longest. It was an amazing tool because I have a hard time going and staying to sleep sometimes. So I love that Calm app. Now, my last question is for people who can't necessarily afford a therapist right now. What other tools, if they need to speak to someone, are available for therapy, if you know?
Well, it depends on your area. So I will say if you have a job, many jobs do have an employee assistance program, so you can
Mhm.
access therapy for free through there. Are also, especially because of the pandemic, a lot of free resources out here. I can't think of the name of the foundation that was created, maybe by Taraji P. Henson. I think they might have like
Mhm.
low cost or um, free services. It might be called a, no, that's not the name of it. I can't remember the name of it, but they do have services through there. But because of the pandemic and the significant impact that it has had on mental health, a lot of local governments have resources available for people to get free services. You can either look up like pro bono counseling services in your area,
Mhm.
or check the local government. But yeah, but not to be morbid, but I was talking to a funeral director, and I was like, oh, these COVID rates are really bad. Like, I know that that's been keeping you busy, and they said, mental health, anxiety, and depression have actually been keeping us more busy than the COVID. And I was like,
Wow.
I that's not something that, even though I work in the field and I'm working with people who experience that regularly, it's not necessarily something that I considered. But that makes sense as to why that there's a lot of funding. Like, a lot of global governments have gotten millions of dollars for mental health. So I would say check that out, because you
Okay.
might be able to get the resources. Um, yeah.
Awesome.
Mhm.
All right. Well, where can everyone find you?
Um, well, I am on Instagram at relationship_boosters. And our YouTube is not really that good yet. We'll be working on that, but stay tuned for that. But well, our email address is relationshipboosters@gmail.com. And I'm Dr. Kia. So, and there's three of us, three women working together to help people to be able to have the best relationships possible. And all of us are actually therapists. We're all licensed therapists, and we all have years of experience doing this work. So, yeah.
Yes, you ladies are all amazing. And if you are looking for some help in regards to, what we talked about today, mental health and money, or just with your relationships in general, definitely follow relationship_boosters on Instagram. They have a lot of great content, and they have a lot of resources that are available to them. So make sure that you check them out. Well, Dr. Kia, it's been a pleasure as always speaking with you. And thank you all for watching. And whoever's going to watch the replay, thanks for checking us out. And we will catch you next time.
All right. Bye. Thanks for having me.
Of course.